AEW All In at London's Wembley Stadium has reportedly distributed over 75,000 tickets for the show later on this summer with a gate that's over $8.5 million. Details on that, plus Wheeler Yuta reportedly suffered a torn hamstring on AEW Dynamite this week. We'll let you know his status for the upcoming Blood and Guts match pitting the Blackpool Combat Club against the Elite. An update, as now it's been revealed what the main event is for Ring of Honor Death Before Dishonor. An update on Bandido after he recently underwent surgery. John Moxley talks about what else, blood in professional wrestling and his philosophy on it, and an update on Jade Cargill's AEW return timeline. Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of All Elite Wrestling. Let's start off talking about All In and a bit more of an update when it comes to the ticket sales for the show at London's Wembley Stadium later on this summer, because AEW All In continues to move tickets. Of course, a report came out just a few days ago suggesting that over 74,000 tickets had been distributed for the event. Not sold, distributed. It's important to know that distinction. But according to Dave Meltzer of today's Wrestling Observer newsletter, AEW All In at Wembley Stadium has 75,030 tickets distributed, with about, and this is a quote, about 68,000 tickets being sold. Of course, AEW All In is scheduled for August 27. Distributed tickets would include comp tickets that don't count as paid tickets. The gate reportedly stands at $8.6 million right now. The current setup, according to WrestleTix, which really broke the story earlier this week about getting close to this 75,000 tickets distributed number, the current setup is for 87,825 at London's Wembley Stadium. But of course, if they continue to move tickets, distribute more tickets, more spaces, more sections, more seats will be opened up. Now, during the AEW Double or Nothing press conference, AEW President Tony Khan stated that AEW All In was at roughly 65,000 tickets sold and closing in on $9 million for the gate. Tony said it's the biggest gate for a wrestling event in England and was informed it's the biggest gate for a wrestling event in the UK, surpassing WWE Clash at the Castle, which drew $8 million. Now, of course, that was prior to Money in the Bank just a few weeks ago, so it's going to be interesting to see how this number, how this gate stacks up against Money in the Bank, to which Triple H said in the post-show press conference it was the largest gate ever, I think, that WWE has done for an arena event. So certainly, again, really interesting to see those numbers. And what are your thoughts on the latest number? Now we're at 75,000 tickets being distributed. Can AEW hit the fabled 90,000 mark? Can they sell out? Could they even do more than that? What's the ceiling? What's the limit for this show, considering that as of right now, no matches have yet to be announced for the show? So what happens when matches are announced? What happens as we get close to the events? How many tickets do you think are going to be sold? And is AEW proving the doubters wrong, or do you still have your doubts? Let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. Now let's talk about Wheeler Yuta. We spoke about Blood and Guts coming up. Now Wheeler Yuta is reportedly still scheduled and expected to participate in the match, but he will be going into the brutal encounter with a serious injury. Wheeler Yuta reportedly picked up a hamstring injury in his match with Kenny Omega this week. The feud between the Blackpool Combat Club and the Elite has provided fans with many memorable matchups, including this past week's edition of AEW Dynamite, which saw Kenny Omega square off with Wheeler Yuta. Despite interference from both Don Callis and Konosuke Takeshita, the Canadian star was able to secure the win in his home country after a one-winged angel. However, per the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter, Yuta is believed to unfortunately have suffered a hamstring injury during the bout with the Best Bout Machine. Luckily, it's clarified that the damage didn't amount to a full tear, and as of now, he's still set to be part of this year's Blood and Guts match. Quote, Wheeler Yuta suffered a hamstring injury in the match with Omega on July 5th. Right now, the belief is that it's not a full tear and he'll be able to return to action for July 19's Blood and Guts in Boston. Of course, that's Dave Meltzer's quotes. As mentioned, Yuta's participation in the July 19 Blood and Guts spectacle is believed to be secure for now. As of now, both the Elite and the Blackpool Combat Club have 4 members entered into the match, with 1 spot yet to be filled on either side. We don't yet know the complete lineups though. It was recently revealed that conversations had taken place between AEW and Kota Ibushi regarding the event. As always, if we get any more updates on Wheeler Yuta, the extent of the injury, if indeed it gets worse and he has to pull out of the match, match, we'll let you know in a future video. But as of right now, the young BCC star is expected to be involved in the Blood and Guts match in a couple of weeks' time. Now, obviously, it was a big month, the past month, for CM Punk returning to AEW, and it wasn't just a big month for him in terms of returning to the ring, it was a big month when it comes to his merchandise. Fans, of course, were eagerly waiting for CM Punk's return on the debut episode of AEW Collision on TNT, Saturday Night Collision, of course. It marked the first time that he appeared on AEW programming since AEW All Out last year. While his return is already a success in the eyes of some, Punk has been getting a lot of mixed reactions from the fans. Now it appears, though, he was AEW's biggest merchandise seller in the past month of June. CM Punk has incited the anger of fans and pro wrestlers alike thanks to his rant after All Out last year and the subsequent backstage brawl with the Elite. Some people say he was justified, other people say he was unprofessional. Of course, it truly changed the course of AEW history in various ways. Barring the debut episode of AEW Collision, Punk has been on the receiving end of quite a bit of boos, or certainly a mixed response to say the least. That being said, there is no doubt that CM Punk is now a major deal in AEW once again. According to Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics, CM Punk was the top earner for the company in terms of merchandise sales for the month of June. Naturally, this was not a surprise for CM Punk, considering he had just returned to the company. As far as the other names listed in order of the most merchandise being sold in June, it went 1. CM Punk, 2. General AEW merch, 3. Orange Cassidy, who continues to sell a ton of merch, 4. The Acclaimed, again, big merchandise movers, and 5, interestingly, Bullet Club Gold. Those Bullet Club shirts refuse to go away, now specifically the AEW Bullet Club Gold versions of them. Well, when it comes to Punk, he's set to square off against Samoa Joe in the next round of the Owen Hart Cup tournament on this week's episode of AEW Collision on TNT. We'll have to wait and see whether Punk will be able to defeat Joe in this match, and certainly if he continues to be a success when it comes to selling merchandise for AEW in the months to come. What are your thoughts on CM Punk selling the most merch in the month of June? Let's talk a little bit about Ring of Honor, because the main event for Death Before Dishonor has now been revealed. As previously reported, Eddie Kingston has sent a message to Mark Briscoe, we'll talk about this in just a second, for him to challenge Claudio Castagnoli for the Ring of Honor World Championship at Death Before Dishonor on July 21st. On the July 6th edition of Ring of Honor Television on Honor Club, Renee Paquette informed Briscoe that Tony Khan has granted him the match if he wants it. Briscoe accepted the match and said he wants to win the top prize in Ring of Honor to follow in his brother Jay Briscoe's footsteps. This brought in Claudio Castagnoli, who warned Briscoe what he's signing up for. Castagnoli stated that the Mark Briscoe he knew wanted to stand side by side with his brother and not in his footsteps, so Mark is showing that he's not man enough to step up to the challenge. Castagnoli vowed to show Mark Briscoe his limits like he showed Eddie Kingston before him. It was then made official that the Ring of Honor World Championship match was on. Now, Death Before Dishonor is going to be taking place on Friday, July 21st in Trenton, New Jersey, and it's going to be headlined by this Ring of Honor World Championship match pitting Claudio Castagnoli versus Mark Briscoe. As I mentioned, this all was set up by Eddie Kingston, who at New Japan Strong Independence Day defeated Kenta to win the Strong Openweight Championship. And on last night's edition of Ring of Honor Television, the show kicked off with highlights of Kingston's victory over Kenta, and then showed footage of a promo Eddie cut after the victory. He sent a message to Mark Briscoe telling him he wore his brother Jay Briscoe's shirt the night before and won the gold for him. The new Strong Openweight Champion also discussed why he and the fans want to see Briscoe challenge for and win the Ring of Honor World Championship at Death Before Dishonor. And as I mentioned, Briscoe accepted and the match is now official. Who do you think wins this one? Are we going to see Mark Briscoe complete the fairy tale story of winning the Ring of Honor World Championship, and is Claudio going to drop the championship for the second time? Now, a bit of an update on Bandido, as he has recently suffered an injury and now has undergone successful surgery. An update has been given on an AEW star, Bandido, who recently underwent surgery for a broken wrist he suffered in mid-June. Former Ring of Honor World Champion Bandido suffered the injury during a match with Konosuke Takeshita on the June 14 edition of AEW Rampage. Following the unfortunate injury, Bandido spoke of needing surgery, and now that has indeed happened. Thankfully, it looks to have been a success, with Bandido sharing an update on his Instagram story and a separate post on his main page. It's unclear when we're going to see Bandido back inside of an AEW ring. However, in the Wrestling Observer newsletter, Dave Meltzer noted that with or without the surgery, the timeline of a return to the ring would likely be at least 3 months. If that is the case, it would of course result in Bandido missing both All In on August 27th from Wembley Stadium and All Out in Chicago on September 3rd. Of course, we wish him the best in his recovery. Hopefully, the prognosis isn't as bad and the recovery isn't as bad, but any injuries this close to the event looks like they could miss out that big stadium show in London. Jon Moxley, blood, they go hand in hand, don't they, of course? Well, Jon Moxley has spoken about all of the talk of him blading too much, bleeding too often, and his philosophy surrounding blood in pro wrestling. I'm really interested to know what you guys think of his comments here. Now, since leaving WWE, Jon Moxley has become famous, or in the eyes of some, certainly infamous, for his tendency to bleed during his matches. So much so that it's become nearly a guarantee at times. Speaking to Sports Illustrated's Justin Barrasso, Moxley gave what he referred to as his dissertation on why he's a fan of blood in wrestling. Quote, "This is a combat sport. College wrestling is a combat sport too. They have blood timeouts to patch it up. The lowest prelim bout of a UFC card or a boxing card, somebody might have a little blood on their eyebrow or blood coming out of their nose. But if not selling a blood sport, it's not tune in for the blood, tune in for the gore. It's part of the aesthetic. It adds realism. Sometimes when I don't even want it to, but I only know one speed, that's with my foot to the gas pedal. If we're going to do something, let's effing do it. That can be detrimental when it comes to negative things like drugs or alcohol, but that's my mindset. If I'm doing it, I'm doing it. When it comes to blood, it's just going to happen sometimes. Like I said, it's foot to the gas pedal. Some people say, this is just a random match. Why is there blood? I heard that last week versus Tomohiro Ishii. He's one of the greatest of all time. I'm not going to let that moment slip by. I'm going to put my foot to the effing gas pedal. How can I not? Then I hear that I can't have a good match without blood. Okay then, you made my argument for me. I'll do it every time. The point of the dissertation is that this is a combat sport, but we're not allowed to have blood in a match unless it's a personal grudge. We're only allowed to have blood after a 5-month grudge, or someone slept with someone's wife, or someone ran over someone with a car, and then, and only then, we are allowed to have this dramatic crimson mask that looks the exact same time every single time. For me, realism-wise, since this is a combat sport, that means that there is the potential for blood in every match. Everything in wrestling is preposterous to some degree, but this helps with the suspension of disbelief. I'm actually for less blood, but more often. If every single match on the card had a busted eyebrow or a bloody nose, it would just be part of the sport. Some gory spectacle with blood shooting like a hose is pretty unnecessary. We're elbowing each other in the face every single match. We're kicking each other in the face every single match. What are these people made of if they're not bleeding? People ask why there is blood in the ring every time I leave it. It feels unnatural to go out of my way to make sure no one is bleeding. That feels like I'm taking my foot off the gas pedal. That doesn't interest me. So, what are your thoughts on Moxley's comments? Because after talking about that, Jim Ross, AEW commentator Jim Ross, spoke on his Grilling JR podcast and kind of had a different perspective on things. JR said, quote, "It can be used as a shortcut, it can be used to add dramatic effect to a match, but it can also be overused. If still used intelligently, timely, logically, I have no problem with it whatsoever. But if you're doing it because you can't think of anything else to do in your match that's going to captivate the audience, that's maybe the wrong reason." So I think it's got to be the right place, the right time scenario. Now again, this debate has continued on by talking about Jon Moxley. Mox recently hit back, as I mentioned, while proclaiming his love for blood in matches. However, as for JR, he too defended the former AEW champion in particular, while also appreciating how many feel it's overdone. He said, quote, "WWE certainly isn't, and I don't think, AEW uses blood more than WWE. I would say barely. Doesn't mean it's better or worse, just mean they use it more often. But if it's used correctly in a timely manner, that makes sense, then I got no problem with it whatsoever." And yes, Moxley has kind of got on a roll where he was getting blood, seemingly colour, every week when he was on television, and sometimes I can see that being, maybe a little bit overdone, but I don't remember Jon getting colour that didn't fit the right mood or the right moment, and that's kind of what it's all about. So I don't know, I'm not anti-blood, I'm just pro-blood when it's used on a timely basis and when it makes sense. So certainly it's a big debate point. It's a big topic in pro wrestling at the moment, the use of blood. Jon Moxley in particular, his in some people's eyes, overuse of blood. What are your thoughts on it? Do you understand Moxley's philosophy when it comes to blood, that he's just trying to add realism to a combat sport? Do you agree with others that say he overdoes it and it needs to be the right time, the right place? Let me know your thoughts, your theories, your opinions, as always, in the comment section below. Finally, a bit of an update when it comes to Jade Cargill, of course, currently on hiatus from AEW after she lost the TBS Championship to Chris Statlander. Jade Cargill, one of AEW's top women's stars, has been strongly pushed since joining the company on November 11, 2020's edition of AEW Dynamite. Cargill has been off AEW TV since AEW Revolution, where she was defeated by returning Chris Statlander to end her remarkable TBS title reign and a 60-0 undefeated streak. Cargill recently stated on Twitter that she enjoys being outside the wrestling bubble and even hinted that she would stay there while living in Hollywood, before stating she has no immediate plans to return to AEW television. Some saw this as her working the fans, but that doesn't appear to be the case according to Dave Meltzer anyway. He's reported in the latest Wrestling Observer newsletter about Jade Cargill's AEW status, saying, quote, "There is no timeline on a return for Jade Cargill. Cargill dropped the TBS title to Chris Statlander at Double or Nothing and hasn't been back nor talked about much since. Cargill reigned as TBS champion for a whopping 508 days, which is a company record, but as of right now, there's no timeline on when she could return." But there you go, guys. This latest AEW news for you. Be sure to smash a like on the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right hand corner. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.